Welcome to Massive Signals, where we explore the companies defining the next wave of deep tech and the inflection points that took them from lab to market. I'm David Mandel, joined by my co-founder Ari Newman. Each episode, we go deep with founders, investors, and researchers driving breakthroughs in energy, quantum, AI, defense, and the new space economy. This is Massive Signals. Hey everybody, welcome back to Massive Signals. Super excited today to have a good friend of mine, Kelly Coyne from D4 Investments on with us. Kelly and I have had some really, really wonderful conversations about deep tech, about investing, about founders, and why all of us in both founding and deep tech are a little weird in the head. And so we're going to jump into that today and learn a lot more about Kelly and how she thinks about investing, and what she sees as key inflection points for trying to invest in and grow deep tech businesses over time. Kelly, thank you for joining us. And
I love the Massive team.
Yeah, we're super excited you're here now.
So excited to have you on the show.
Yes. So you kind of started in the corporate world in marketing and communications, and before you kind of made the big leap to venture, why don't you kind of give us a little background about who you are, where you started, how you got here today, wasting time with us.
Yes. So I'm from Colorado. And so I grew up here. I went to Boulder for undergrad, and my degree is in integrative physiology. It's like pre-med. I do absolutely nothing with it at all. After I graduated, I went to level 3 communications, which is, that kind of homegrown telco right here in Colorado. From there, I started off as a, marketing intern. By the time I left, I was running virtual private networks for the company as a product manager. From there, I went and got my master's at Oxford, and then went straight out to Silicon Valley and started joining startups at a really, really early stage. So employee 5 or under. I did some Wi-Fi hardware, all focused on deep tech and hardware. So I did some Wi-Fi hardware, and then I ended up at a robotics company in 2015. When I left that company, I realized that there was so little expertise on the business side of the house in deep tech. So I started a consulting firm to help companies think about how to do all of that business side of the house. And that led into raising my first venture capital fund, which was Grit Ventures, that focused only on industrial robotics. I was absolutely fixated on that topic for that time. And so after I deployed all of Grit Ventures into robotics companies, I left and went to D4 Investments, where I am now. And we are now starting to really focus on the quantum space and think that's going to be our next fixation as an investor group.
Awesome. Really, really good kind of overall arc. Appreciate it. Let's dig in a little back there a little. So graduated from Oxford and you went right into startups. Like that's kind of not the usual path coming out of like a grad school at Oxford. So like what was your thought process around like, I really want to just be stressed the fuck out every day and be working?
No, she was like, I just totally need more college debt money to pay off later.
Exactly,
so then let's go into startups with
I don't want a solid.
I'm never right.
Rely on to pay all my college debt off. Yeah.
So my husband, who I met at Oxford and wanted to go into management consulting, we're not going to let him hear this part of the podcast. Okay.
Okay, we promise. What's his name? Wait, what's his name?
Ryan.
Okay, this is a non-Ryan segment. We're just.
Well, I will say I do remember a moment. So I was at level 3 and I was 23 years old, and I was new to the company, and I got interviewed for the company's magazine. And the person asked me, "What's your favorite part about working at level 3?" And I said, "Oh my gosh, I love the fire drills." And I remember this person laughing, and I couldn't comprehend that not everyone loved that intensely stressful, chaotic moment in time as their favorite. And so once I realized that that's kind of who I was, I realized I would probably have more fun in these more stressful environments, these earlier stage startups. And I actually do give people this advice a lot when they're thinking about where they want to go with their career. Like, how stressed out do you enjoy being?
All right, David, side note that Kelly is for sure on the zombie defense team.
Yes, no question.
So
you have no idea what that entails. You will be briefed later. Moving on.
I can guess, and I think yes.
Awesome. So did the startup world live up to your desired level of total stress?
Oh my gosh, it was incredible. I loved it. I loved every moment. I could not have enjoyed it more. The only reason I even contemplated leaving was because I had kids and my lifestyle had to change. I had myself and my husband both in startups working 14-hour days minimum. And so it turns out daycares close at 6, which was the most shocking moment of my life. And so I realized I had to have more control over my schedule.
Welcome to the thrills and pitfalls of parenthood. Yeah. So you chose the nice, relaxed, casual life of venture.
Right.
Deep tech venture.
That's
Yes.
Yes, exactly. And raising one's own fund. Exactly.
Was that a solo fund?
No, I had a partner.
And D4 Investments, you're making the investment decisions over there. You're going all in on quantum going forward. You've talked before about being uncomfortable. Apparently, you like drama and fire drills, right? You're purpose built for this industry. Why talk to us why you think being wrong is one of the most important skills in venture capital.
I think being comfortable with being wrong is one of the most important skills in life. It does not matter what your job, what your role is. Being very comfortable with being wrong makes you the best version of yourself. And I've long talked about how I think that we've confused stubbornness with masculinity for a long time as a culture. And stubbornness isn't masculinity, it's insecurity. And so truly secure people are very comfortable being wrong. And I think that this is one of those things that if you want to be in a very fast moving place like deep tech, you have to feel okay with it. And the example I give of this and why it is relevant to this conversation is I think at least one of you two was in this meeting. So I was on the stage at the School of Mines, I want to say this summer, and quantum came up and I immediately just bashed it. I said, that's not real. That's not interesting. Why would anyone invest in that? That was the summer of 2025. By October of 2025.
By the way, that was probably a conversation I was having with a quantum founder. So clearly I was doing a really good job of convincing everybody how valuable quantum was going to be. If you're like, why the hell would you ever invest in that? After listening to that conversation.
Oh God. So yeah, by October of 2025, I'm showing up to, to a massive dinner with David and Ari and saying, this is all I can think about. I can't talk or think about anything other than quantum. This is the future. And this is all I want to talk about. And so, but you have to be so comfortable with saying, oh my gosh, I was so wrong on stage in front of so many people. Right. And that's okay. It's what isn't okay is to decide to hold on and cling to that and just make bad decisions and shoot yourself in the foot over not wanting people to know you're wrong.
Well, I think it's a superpower for great investors because you have to have a really strongly held belief for at least 5 minutes, right? To have conviction on something, make an investment in it and believe in it. And then time and results speak for themselves. And then that belief is gone, right?
Yeah.
Or reinforce.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Ari, are we finished?
Yeah.
The phrase I use for that is strong opinions loosely held.
Yes.
Yeah. But I was going to say, Ari and I talk about this a lot, right? So this is a lot about pattern recognition and self-awareness. And being mature from a self-awareness level is critical, whether you're an investor or even more so as a founder, right? And way too many founders think that their job is to know all the answers. And when they make a decision, that's got to be the right answer, and they stick to it, until death or high water or whatever. But the good founders are self-aware and they look at data and they're comfortable saying, okay, you know what, that was the wrong decision. We need to shift, and here's why.
It's often an opportunity for new data to change your mind.
Yeah. Yeah. So what was the data that made you transition from robotics to quantum?
Oh my God. That's an excellent question that I was actually wholly unprepared for.
Those are my favorite questions.
Just wait.
I think what happened was I started to look at Colorado, right? So I had lived in San Francisco for most of my investment career. I moved to Colorado and really felt like that was the end of this kind of rocket ship career I was kind of putting together out in Silicon Valley. And it was fine. I was okay with that. I love Colorado. I'm happy to be here. And I think I stumbled across what is happening in Colorado with quantum. And I realized I'm sitting in the exact right place in the exact right time for this technology to take off. And so it felt like this moment in time that I could not let pass me by.
So almost like a key inflection point.
Absolutely. And I think especially we are seeing it particularly in specific geographies. And I think that's one of the things that people really need to get their heads around in quantum is I've never seen a technology that is more geographically based. And so it really does make a difference where you are.
David and I do talk about timing a lot also. And in a lot of cases in our careers, we've been too early with things. And I think being a deep tech or frontier tech investor, like inherently, back to your point about being okay with being wrong, it's like it really comes down to that. I made early investments in the commercial drone industry that were too early. I built a file share, like Dropbox in 1999. Bandwidth was way too expensive, too early, right? Like you can have great ideas and good technology, but the market timing is really critical as well. And I absolutely feel like we are in the right time at the right place. But like, let's push a little here. Like with all the years that you spent in robotics, didn't it feel like you were at the right time in the right place when robotics was coming up?
Listen, Ari, I don't appreciate this train of thought. No, I mean, it did. It did. And I think that there is a lot of straddling that line between first mover advantage and what we can learn from all of those mistakes. And I think there are a lot of times when we are working within hard tech specifically, you really have to look at that line because software can pivot so quickly and so easily that first mover advantage means a ton. Whereas for robots specifically, one of the biggest things that we learned in that space was like moving fast and breaking things 100% does not work for that industry. You need to make sure that that very expensive robot that you build is exactly what the customer wants and works to spec before you spend $10 million on a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
And we've seen so many companies in that industry that have failed from that instinct to move at the pace of software. And so we learned so much about customers. I think along with the rest of the industry, we learned that customers are what matter. We went through those growing pains we have seen throughout all of tech, moving from engineering is everything. Engineering is God to sales and customers are what matter. And we've seen this shift happen in companies, and we've really specifically seen it happen. And I know what I look for in founders. Going from if you're a brilliant engineer, you can sell your tech will sell to if you're an amazing salesperson, you'll get customers.
Yeah. First mover advantage in hardware is it may not be an advantage. You're just the first mover and you're inventing things out of whole cloth and you're priming the market for something. You look at, I always go back to Apple and the iPod. They sat there and they watched Creative and all these other companies try to build MP3 players, and almost all of them were garbage. And they waited until they figured out how to build one that met their design standards. And it was a step function. It was like a completely different thing than all of the other MP3 players that had existed. And by waiting and waiting, everyone thought Apple was going to lose, but they were letting all these other companies spend billions of dollars priming the market for digital music.
Yeah, I also think that's a great example of what Kelly was just saying around the value of marketing and sales in robotics as well, right? And when you say marketing and sales, it's not just can you push hard enough to sell something, is do you understand what your customer really wants?
Yeah.
Right? And what they're going to connect to and what they're going to attach to and feel good with, as opposed to just a thing that works.
So Kelly, given your history in robotics and your perspective on this, what's your hot take on what's happening with robotics today, humanoid robotics from Figure and Optimus? I mean, give us your perspective on this.
Do we call Neuralink robotics? I don't even know.
Wrong. This is such a great one. So I always said humanoids were so dumb, and we weren't going to make any money off humanoids. I think the jury is still out in a lot of ways. But I said we weren't going to make any money off humanoids. I didn't want to invest in humanoids, so I didn't. But I did invest in this little like robotic arm company that was not at all a humanoid that became Aptronic, which is definitely going to be my fund returner. So, I mean, that's just another one that really showed me. I wasn't exactly correct there. I do think that we're hitting I think we're a bit past that inflection point moment that we as venture capitalists that we as early stage venture capitalists would see in robotics. I think we're as we think about this podcast and we think about the inflection point, I think we're a little bit past that in robotics now. I think I was probably a bit too early when I first started, but now we're seeing these valuations really increase. We're seeing people start to consolidate, and we're not seeing the same level of you can really dominate a vertical by just understanding how to put together a robot that works there.
What are the signals that tell you we're past that sort of early stage where, like, clearly robotics have product market fit on the industrial side? They basically make everything for us. What are the next signals you're looking for on robotics doing jobs in the household that would tell you this is going to stick, for example?
Robotics doing jobs in the household. Oh my gosh, that's such a hard one. I mean, I don't know when we get there to a place that makes
I
sense.
mean, Elon's talking about Optimus folding your laundry for you.
I think that I just fundamentally think he probably hasn't folded enough laundry to know what that actually really needs to look like. I don't know. I think that I think the issue is, and this gets into places we get later in this, that things we want to talk about later in this podcast. But I think that the fundamental issue that we run into with humanoid robots is that until you reach general artificial intelligence, until you have AI that can think like a human, how can a robot do the things that a human can do? And so there are so many places that robots are amazing. But to be honest, like, we all live in households where, you or your partner aren't as good at certain household tasks because you aren't thinking through the details in the same way that they are. And laundry's one, right? And I think
I'm laughing because I'm worse at 99% of the household tasks than my partner. But I disagree though. I think robots can be taught very quickly to replicate like repetitive tasks. They can learn. And a lot of the way that they're programmed is watch me do this 100 times. Now you do it 10,000 times the same way. Yes. Do we need AGI for it to be incrementally adaptable?
Okay.
Or can it, or does it need to be marginally intelligent to understand that you don't fold jeans the same way you fold a sweater?
Definitely, I hear that. This is so nuanced, but like, I think about laundry. Okay. So laundry, when I'm doing it, there are clothes that can't be dried. They just have to be hung. There's not a specific reason for that. It's my feeling on the clothes. Right. And it's like, well, they're nice clothes. Well, what does that mean? And I think that I think we can get there, but I absolutely think we can get there. I think there can be rules. I just think that so much of what comes from running a household and would be truly valuable to justify the cost, right? You have to include the full in cost of a robot and what people would actually be paying to say if it works or not. Because yes, would a robot folding my laundry be helpful? Yes. At that price point, no. And so when we think about the things that I would pay anything for to help me running the house, I think we're further from that. The million things lying around the house that you have to think about where to go, and even I'm not sure where to put them, the robot can't do that. And that's what I want. That's what I'd pay any tens of thousands of dollars to have around the house.
We're going to have a sidebar about that later because I've got someone for you.
But let's use that context because that's super interesting context. And let's use that context and overlay that on quantum, right? Because you're switching from robotics to quantum now. You could certainly make the argument that quantum's in a very similar space right now where a lot of it is not really commercializable, right? They're very experimental. You don't really know what the customer thinks they want a thing. But they don't really know what that thing is yet. But quantum gets them excited, just like robotics got them excited, right? And we're still waiting for, as an overall industry, like, what's the actual product? We know the end value product, right? But what's the right product that quantum is going to provide to bring that to market?
Before we get too far here, let's do a little bit of a quantum primer for the audience. So what does quantum actually mean in practical terms today? What does it mean for investors and founders? And why is this the hot topic?
Okay, so I think that a really good place to start with this is to understand, why is this being talked about right now? It's like, why is everybody starting to chat about this? So, and I think the easiest way to explain this and what I normally use is RSA encryption. So RSA encryption, our entire world runs off of this. It is incredibly difficult for a computer, even the supercomputers of today, to see that large number and figure out the two factors. Our entire world is based off this encryption of computers today can't figure out what those two factors would be. However, quantum computing would be able to do that in minutes. And here's the reason for that without getting too technical. And I wish I had a whiteboard behind me right now. But essentially, let's pretend that you have a 4-digit code and you have a 4-digit code and you're trying to figure out a 4-digit code with today's computer, right? Now, to figure out that 4-digit code in this computer, everything is a 0 or 1. It's binary. Okay. So they would first try 0001, then 0011, 0111, right? And they're going through all these iterations of this because normal compute is binary. It's a 0 or it's a 1. Quantum is not binary. Instead of thinking about it as a light switch, think about it as a circle with an arrow pointing somewhere in the circle, a little bit up or a little bit down. Where it is creates a probability of where it's going to land. But because we're dealing only in probabilities, for all intents and purposes, that circle is both 0 and 1. So while this computer over here is filling each of these in over and over and guessing, the quantum computer guesses all 4 of these as 0 or 1 at the same time and immediately comes up with the answer. This is what is making the world wake up and say, we have to really be thinking about this technology because we are in a bit of a space race where we went from where our entire world is based on RSA encryption. And we don't know when quantum computing is suddenly going to be able to crack that encryption or who's going to do it. And so that is why we are seeing so much about this, because we are now in this race to be the first ones to do it, but we're also trying to protect ourselves against that eventuality.
And just before anyone freaks out too bad, that moment when quantum computers are able to break modern military grade symmetrical encryption is known as Q-Day. And so everyone talks about Q-Day, and anyone who's selling quantum stuff will tell you Q-Day is coming tomorrow and you need to buy their stuff right now. And then when you look at the qubit density of the current quantum computers, the energy required and the durability of operations coming through quantum computers, the scientists will tell you the Q-Day is still several years away. And we actually don't know how close other countries are. This truly is the next global arms race for information dominance, but everyone's working on it. But the quantum computers of today are sort of like the mainframes of the 60s vis-a-vis compute power. And while a mainframe of the 60s could eventually break 256 AES symmetrical encryption, it would run for years and years to get there to the point where it wouldn't be the data wouldn't be relevant. That's starting to collapse. And I think you articulated the urgency really well. We don't know if this is going to be a breakthrough news cycle in 3 days or it's still 5 years from now.
Yeah. And I will say, I say all of that with the notion too that, and this is where I really think we get caught up in quantum. And I think this happened to me. And I think this happens to so many people who say quantum is so far away and nothing that we need to think about. Quantum is more than quantum compute. There are so many different categories of quantum that you can be investing in, and so many of them are making money right now. So the way I think it's kind of easy to break it up in your head is we have quantum compute, which is this huge mammoth. This is going to be the next $1 trillion industry. But then we also have, quantum perception, if you will, quantum sensing, quantum simulation, timing, and quantum security, which, quantum comms, right? And so I think that we have these categories that are really investable right now. They're already making revenue. They're particularly interesting if you happen to be in the right geographies, that you can invest in today without having to bet on who is going to be the winner of quantum compute.
After that wonderful description of quantum from Professors Coyne and Newman, which I truly appreciate, I'm going to go back to my original question, which was, compared to robotics, quantum is a very similar market. Yes, there are there are quantum solutions out there, PNT, sensing, networking, that are driving revenue right now. But very few of them are anywhere close to their actual value promise from a technical perspective, right? So, quantum computing driving tons of venture capital, crazy valuations. I guarantee we're going to see a market correction very soon. You're going to see a lot of M&A. A lot of these companies are going to go to zero. So they're all going to get absorbed. On the PNT side, there's some really interesting point solutions that are mostly funded from the military. Overlaying that market into your insight from the robotics market and coming in too early, how do you reconcile the two, right? Like how can you feel good, or are you just so comfortable with the potential of being wrong that you're like,
No.
"Who cares? It's too cool. I'm all in."
Okay, so first of all, I think we need to all acknowledge a reality of what is happening in venture capital, because this is so important to understand investment trends. Venture capital in the last few years has undergone this massive shift away from a diverse set of smaller funds towards most of the money going towards these large mega funds. Now, the large mega funds, the thing is, they still play by the power laws of venture capital. They still anticipate that 1 to 2 companies within their portfolio will pay back their entire fund. However, now those funds are so big that the only markets that are investable for these companies are those trillion-dollar markets. Whereas funds like ours that don't have to pay back a $20 billion fund with a single company, we can invest in different areas than they can. And so we have this ability to invest elsewhere, and it should not be seen as less than it should not be seen as less than in comparison to these strategies that the mega funds are using. A multiple is a multiple. That's all anyone is looking for, is a multiple on their money. It doesn't matter how you get there. Unfortunately for them, they have narrowed the ways that they can get there.
Right. Yep. So, by the way, we would aggressively agree with you. I don't know.
Violently? No.
Yes. But what I'm trying to get to more is like, if that's the opportunity, right? You're looking for multiples in this industry.
Yeah.
Like, what are the key things that you as an investor have to look for? Like, so if I'm a founder and I'm working on a quantum company, right? Like, what are the things I need to communicate to investors to really get them to understand that there's an investable business here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think number one, as investors, we're looking for real near-term revenue. I know I am. And so I'm looking for these products that can bring near-term revenue. We see a lot of really interesting examples of that in Colorado. I think Vescent is a great example of people that have understood how to take this moment in time. If you don't know Vescent, they are building the components of for quantum. Now, you think in your head, they must only be selling to research labs. That's simply not true. I hope I'm not stealing. They can cut this out. These guys can cut this out. It's okay. They are selling 80% of their sales last year were commercial. So they really have figured out how to make their way in this market at a very early stage. So there's the components section, which I think is huge. I think if you're in Colorado, you should be looking at it 1,000 times over. Now, as for the other sections of quantum, we have quantum compute, but all of that falls under the broader quantum technology. We have to realize the headliner is quantum technology. It's not quantum compute. Underneath quantum technology falls so many different areas of expertise. And first of all, this has been in the world for so long. MRIs is quantum technology. Your silicon chips, your fiber optic networks, GPS, all of this is already in. It's not new technology. We are just taking the next step with it. And so I think that we are seeing these places where you really can make money outside of that huge realm of we have to see quantum advantage or quantum supremacy before we can do anything.
Yeah. We've all been operating through multiple market cycles, and every one of these market evolutions sort of has things in common in terms of foundational stuff getting built, infrastructure for scale, applications on top of them. Eventually you get up the stack enough to get to the pure value and utility, and then the technology takes a backseat. And we're still in such early innings with quantum. Your point about investing in stuff that's driving near-term revenue that has real use cases today, largely, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, means finding companies that are selling into the quantum industry as quantum matures. Whereas if I was going to go start a company tomorrow that was building enterprise software that was going to replace Salesforce that was built for the quantum realm. Is that investable today, or is that too early?
I think that we're seeing people that are building things for the quantum ecosystem. Yes, that exists, but we're also seeing people just taking the next step on GPS and selling to the military, and selling to the governments. We're seeing people sell PQC and QKD. They're starting to work through that and figure that is something that we've been talking about that is immediate now and needs to be solved. We have, I think, simulation. We are starting to be able to see, the lower levels of simulation that's in the market, that's being sold. We're seeing breakthroughs in multiple industries on how quantum simulation is helping, everything from finance to pharma do the job better. And so we really do across industries and across different sections of quantum, we are seeing these being released into the wild, both commercially and as well as within the industry. And so I don't think that we have to live in this mindset that we're just quantum selling to quantum, because it's just not true. And it hasn't been true since the 70s.
What I'm trying to get to is like Kelly's filters here, right? And by the way, full transparency, we're investors invested. It's one of our portfolio companies. We are big believers and just want to make sure we're being fully transparent here. But like if I'm a quantum founder and I'm trying to build a quantum solution and I'm pitching Kelly at D4 for funding, like what are your specific filters? Like, do you consider grants revenue? Do you think, like what are you going to make those bets on as an investor that the founders need to be thinking through when they're pitching?
Okay. So I have a number of different things that I toy with in my head that are like on my brain as I'm talking to a quantum startup. So number one is I think about their geography. Where do they live? I mentioned this before that I've never seen an industry that has more of a geographic centric filter than quantum. And when you talk to someone in this industry, you will say, hey, why did they decide to use trapped ions instead of photonics? And they'll say, oh, they use trapped ions because they're coming out of Oxford, right? They use neutral atoms because they're coming out of Colorado. It is an industry where the lab space required to build these products is too expensive for individual startups to create on their own. It is funded by government, and your area where the government funded these specific labs determines what you're working on. And so as you start with thinking, where do I have unique access? For me, those areas are Colorado and the UK. Where do I have unique access? And what are those places working on? What is their domain? In Colorado, we have AMO, atomic, molecular, and optical physics is what we are best at. So you see a lot of things like lasers, trapped ion, neutral atoms. That is where we are going to be the best. You're not going to see us competing in supercompute in the same way that we'll see a Chicago competing. We are much more likely to be seen in precision timing and sensing and simulation, which is part of the reason that I'm so much more comfortable with those spaces, because that's who I talk to living where I live. So that's one. I start there, right? Are you even doing anything that makes sense? Or are you accidentally doing this thing because that's what your geography was doing and you tried to turn it into a company? So I kind of start there.
Wait, I have a question.
Okay.
You just said that like Colorado is not known for compute, but we have atom computing, inflection, and quantinium here.
Again, remember, so I'm starting at startup land. So let's start there.
Very early. Yes, you're not jumping into it back.
And to be clear, when I talk about what we're not known for, I'm talking really about different qubit types. So when you think about who is going to be the winners in supercompute, the types of qubits that Colorado is known for are not necessarily the ones that the industry believes are going to be the winners in that space. Because of that, we see our area focusing on very different things.
I love it. And we clearly need to get the founders of these three companies on the pod for the Qubit Wars episode.
Exactly. And I would also, I would echo around your value prop based on place. There's a lot of going on here from LA Quantum to Quantum Commons. Like there's true community in this region here. And when you're working on very difficult, deep technical solutions, it's a huge advantage to have that community.
Well, and I think that there's a reality. I mean, I know that, I've seen issues where someone just this week, I was talking to a startup founder that was no longer going to be able to use the lab that they use here in Colorado? And their answer wasn't to say to go to a different lab in Colorado. They said, okay, I got Santa Barbara, I got Boston. Those are my two options because that's where the labs exist that I need. Okay, so I really believe in that. I really believe in geography. It's something that is huge for me, and it's something I fixate on quite a bit. After that, I started thinking about our near-term revenue, and I pair that with what is not completely oversaturated and valuation hyped by the Silicon Valley investors, right? So we know where they are looking, we know what they're doing, and we know why. So those valuations are necessarily going to be probably higher than they need to be. And when we think about where we're going to see kind of those crashes, it's going to be in those areas that are being invested in the mega funds. And so if we pull ourselves out of that and think about number one, where are they not investing? And number two, what is near term? It turns out that they're kind of the same. We see more of these near-term opportunities within areas outside of the full stack supercompute platforms, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I really like to think about where are we going to see this? Where within this stack of, domain qubit platform system application should we be investing? And I think as we look through this, we need to pull ourselves out of full stack if we are these early stage investors, because I'm just not sure that it makes as much sense for us.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you for that context, by the way. So there you go. Founders who are listening, write those things down, get them in your pitch, and we'll get you Kelly's contact information so you can make sure we get them.
And I'm sure it's no surprise that at Massive, we have a similar mindset in terms of where the investable opportunities are. So, yeah. So let's go a little further down this quantum road of entanglement. And I'm curious, like, what's got your attention right now? What are some of the things that are in quantum that are kind of blowing your mind or fascinating you?
We're not going to talk about what is fascinating me in the world of commercial right now. We're just going to talk about what is making my love affair with quantum go crazy. So I think that there are a couple things worth talking about. One of the first things that really, I think, made my mind completely explode when I was going through quantum was Schrodinger's cat. So we're all familiar with this. So viewers aren't. I don't know. Do either of you want to explain this?
You're going to explain it for us. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to explain it badly. All right. So we essentially, if you consider that you put a cat in a box with poison, and the poison, and I think you also.
By the way, we do not at Massive Signal condone any of these practices in any way. We are simply.
So here's what happened. So in between like 1900 and 1935, this is when quantum started to explode. This is when every household name that you know in scientists started to explore quantum theory and figure out how does this play into the current theories of the world of physics that we know. Near the end of this, Schrodinger got on stage and he gave this example to explain quantum theory. And it's that you put a cat inside a box. And if you put them in there with, I think he has some sort of poison and some sort of radioactive measure that will make the poison decay over time. And then you close the box. And he says that until you open that box, the cat is neither alive nor dead until you open that box. Every time I've heard this, it was always meant to explain quantum superposition and that it's neither this nor that. But that was not the purpose of the story. And this is what blew my mind. He told that story to say, do you realize how ridiculous this is? Like he wanted the room to acknowledge that of course the cat is it's alive or dead inside the box. It doesn't matter whether you open it. He wanted them to acknowledge that. And what he wanted them to acknowledge was we are missing some fundamental piece of physics that marries quantum and gravity. And so either missing that or we need to explain why quantum doesn't work at a macro level. And that was what he was trying to explain, is that clearly we are starting to understand this, but there's a huge piece that is missing that no one has solved yet. And that was the purpose. It wasn't to give this tiny little explanation of quantum. And that, I don't know, to me, I just thought that was amazing.
So you may or may not be investing in quantum, or you may be and may not be investing in quantum at the same time.
Is this new information information to the people on this call. Did everyone know this?
Certainly, David and I know the story. Well, and what else has got your attention?
Okay.
You mentioned something called Penrose and Hameroff.
This is like the ultimate in nerd. And I need people to understand that I am not coming on this call and saying I believe in the Penrose and Hameroff theory. I am saying that it is so interesting that I don't know how you could read it and not become fascinated with quantum. Okay, so let's start with Roger Penrose. He is a Nobel Prize winner in physics, okay? And he had long been kind of walking down this road of saying that there is something missing. He believed in Schrodinger's notion that there was something missing. And he also believed that gravity was likely responsible for waveform collapse. Waveform collapse when we see it go from a wave to a point. He thought that likely gravity was responsible for that. But as he's moving through this journey, he comes to this realization. He has no answer for it. But he comes to a realization that the human brain is not algorithmic. So the human brain, to him, must use non-computable physics. Mm-hmm. So he starts to think, okay, he believes that the human brain is operating on quantum. He writes a book on this. He has no answers. His issue is that he cannot think of a biological process that could handle quantum. So he writes a book on it, but he still believes that perhaps the human brain and consciousness is operating on some level of non-computable quantum-based physics. Stuart Hameroff is an anesthesiologist. He reads Penrose's book, and during Stuart's life, he has spent his entire life studying the human brain, and he has come across these really interesting places in the brain called microtubules. Okay, they're essentially like the skeleton of many cells, but we happen to have a lot of them in the brain. And so they believe that these microtubules within the brain, they weirdly look very much like quantum loops, in that they're like one directional, that sort of thing. He comes to believe that these microtubules in the brain are where we are hosting quantum entanglement and what is responsible for our consciousness. He calls Penrose, and Penrose says, yeah, man, this sounds great. So they start going down this journey of trying to explore whether quantum waveform collapse is the secret behind human consciousness. And the way that they talk about it, which I think is really interesting, they call it orchestrated OR. What they believe is it's an orchestrated waveform collapse. So if you think of the example that I thought was kind of interesting was, okay, if you think about someone in sports, someone like a tennis player has to make this like immediate decision that I'm going to go left and I'm going to put my arm over there. And they're not making that decision and having every muscle in their arm make that decision. What the thought is that you have these entangled quantum electrons, atoms within the different microtubules within your body. And that when you have that moment of consciousness that collapses the waveform, that observation, if you will, that collapses the waveform, it immediately signals to all the muscles down your arm how to hit your tennis racket left and in the perfect way. And that is the orchestratedness of this theory.
So what we consider muscle memory is actually quantum theory.
That's exactly what they're saying.
That's perfect. Somebody should dissect an F1 driver's brain to see if they've got more of these tubes than anyone else because of how good their reaction times are.
Okay, so I actually did go look it up. And so you have a ton of these microtubules in your brain, but you also have a ton in the muscles.
Yep.
And I just want you guys to know, like, most people think this is totally kooky, right? But also, I mean, he's not just some guy. He has a Nobel Prize.
Yeah, there are a lot of things in our world right now that people 5 years ago thought were completely kooky.
That's what I think.
So we have no problem with this. This is a super interesting conversation.
You know, one of the things that I've kind of paid attention to over the last few years is both in sci-fi and the real world, people are talking about sentience being preserved in quantum computers, and that quantum computers are much better suited towards like human brain proxy than binary computers. Yeah. So what you're saying makes perfect sense. And whether it's made up in sci-fi or there's real, science behind this, like I mean, David and I read a book about a superhuman that was stored in a quantum supercomputer, right? So you're not completely off the deep end on this one.
We started at that at the very beginning, right? We were talking about general artificial intelligence. How do we get there? And, Penrose's theory is that until we stop thinking about human intelligence as algorithmic and think about it as non-computational, we will never get there. And so he believes that you have to solve the problem of what is the quantum theory behind consciousness before you could ever get to that level of, AI brain.
Well, I mean, that's, a lot of quantum is once you get down to a certain level of physics, all physics breaks down anyway, and you realize you didn't actually have a clue what you were talking about.
So when Penrose calls you after hearing this podcast, are you going to invest in whatever he's building?
Oh my God. So, funny enough, I started going down this path because I was on the phone. So Penrose is currently living in Oxford. And I was on the phone call with a PhD from Oxford, and that they had just set me up with to talk to about quantum. And he's listing out everything that he's interested in. And so, and he's interested in all these things like, how noisiness can be beneficial, which is one of the big reasons they say that, you can't cohere in the brain is because of noise. And he's in biological quantum. Anyway, he has all these different pieces he's studying. And I go and I look them up afterwards and I say, oh my gosh, you are totally studying Penrose. And that is how I ended up getting down this road.
Got it.
Where, as an early stage investor that has obviously done some mushrooms and thought very deeply about quantum, whether or not you've done the actual mushrooms, what are some of the areas specifically from an investment perspective that you're like really digging in?
Okay, I will start off. So again, I live in Colorado. Components, we are going to lead the world in components. I love Vescent, spending a ton of time with them, hope to go in on their next round. I think that we are really going to see ourselves succeed there. I really like sensing. I like simulation. I don't think that comms, so PQC and QKD, I don't think that Colorado is as strong there. And that's just not a place that I am looking as closely. I am looking at the components of compute. When I say I'm not going to invest in compute, I mean I'm not going to invest in the full stack.
Right.
Error correction is fascinating, and there's a lot going on in Oxford there. I think that there's these pieces of it that we can look in. I think that, I've been spending a ton of time with Icarus, which is just fascinating because I think realistically, we are going to get to a point with, not only supercompute scale, but also hybrid modalities where we need to see these joint platforms in order to offset some of the cons of the different qubit types. And I really think that people like Icarus are going to be really interesting there. And they're a great example of somebody that I've spent a lot of time pushing to find that earlier revenue. And it exists. They're all these guys have been taught to chase that largest TAM that they can find and not think about anything else. But when you really push them, there's earlier TAM. There's more near-term TAM that they can chase pretty easily. And so I think that as we think about those components and sensing, timing, of course, anything with timing in Colorado is going to be huge.
Yeah.
I think, I look at anything with, neutral atoms, trapped ions, and photonics. That's kind of what we're good at. Scientific simulation, infrastructure monitoring. I'm trying to like not bore everyone to death in here. These sorts of things, but components, platform validation, precision and timing, measurement, timing and synchronization. This is what we are incredible at here. And I think that's where we're going to see those real strengths in the places that we have access to. And of course, atomic clocks and things like that, they're already out there, but they're always being improved. And so I think that we even see MRIs, they're being improved. We're moving from these horrible experiences of MRIs where you can't move and you have to lay in this thing to MRI helmets, right? All of these things that have been such a huge part of our world for so long and already exist are being advanced. And I think those are the places that we're also going to see those more near-term deployments commercially.
So one of the challenges with this that I talk about a lot is just cost of getting these things to market, right? And as an early stage investor, I don't think we talked about how big your fund is, right? But capital requirements, getting some of these, even early TAM, right? Like some, they're, as we found out, they're always focused on the largest TAM, but if they can find that early TAM to get to market, great. But it's still very few of it very few of those opportunities are opportunities that are really going to drive the capitalization of the company over time. So how do you think about investing over time, partnering? Like what's the venture stack in your mind to get companies to market?
So there is a venture stack, and I will go through that. But I think one of the things to start with, and guys, push back on me, please. Like, listen, I think we are all inventing our investment thesis on quantum together at the same time. So please don't.
Honestly, Kelly, we agree with you on almost all this. You just say it in a much more interesting way than we do. So we're happy to just let you talk.
When I ever say anything so stupid, please tell me and know I'm okay with it. Anyone who hears this podcast and hears me say something stupid, don't get mad. Just tell me. um,
No
Just
worries.
remember that being wrong is a competitive advantage.
You're wrong if you can get people to let you know is especially exciting. So I think one of the things that I've been really interested in like toying with lately, before I get into where you play within the platform stack, is kind of thinking about these like laser based versus fabrication based advantages. And so when we think about the sorts of applications that require that they require like real fabrication, they require things to be etched on chips. So you have to have this whole lab set up in order to make it work. Those are expensive. They cost a lot of money up front. And we end up seeing, and this is, full stack integration, superconducting systems, those sorts of things are just very, very capital intensive. They require clean rooms, and you have to have these like uniformity and yield and facilities and process learning and all of these different things that they're dealing with that are just very, very expensive. This is, superconducting qubit platforms and qubit platforms. That's right. And not to, again, just hit on how much I feel like I do have, deal flow access, that dreams are made of. But when we think about the types of geographies that are focusing on neutral atoms, trapped ions, optical clocks, those are not fabrication-based wins. Those are laser-based. And lasers are much lower cost to get to market to control. When you're using lasers to nudge around a qubit, you are much more likely to get to market at a reasonable cost than you are when you have to etch something into fabrication. And so I think that is definitely one of the more interesting places to try and, bifurcate how you think about it.
That's also a more mature market. There's some fairly big companies doing a laser-based quantum timing as well.
Right. And I think that's one of the reasons that it doesn't feel like such fantasy to me, right? We see Vescent coming out with, their laser cones. We see people doing, again, GPS. This isn't new, right? Better GPS. Okay, cool. And then I think that as I look at where I want to invest and where I want to focus, so I really do think that, I think that these foundational fields, topological things like that, it scares me. It's expensive. It's long. As an early stage investor, I'm not sure it's within the timeline of my fund length. But I love components, absolutely, particularly given where we live in Colorado. I love platforms. I think that that's where we are going to see things next. I like looking at systems. And I think that a lot of these actually kind of like application specific things, we might be a little too early for. I'm not sure that's where particularly early stage investors like us are going to be making our money right now.
That was the point I was making earlier, right? Yeah. Which is there is you've got to be building for where the customers in the near term revenue are. There's a thing as being too early. If the enterprise applications, if there was quantum apps rolling off the line, but people aren't ready to like move their existing binary compute to cubic, fuzzy compute anytime soon, like that software is going to sit on the shelf. Looking at it from a system perspective is really important. If you go all the way back to how we built Internet 1.0, like you couldn't just have networking. You couldn't have servers without networking. You couldn't have security. If you didn't have security in place, you couldn't do any of it. Like you needed the entire stack to work together to be able to deliver the service. And the same will be true in the quantum world, I think.
So Kelly, give us one misconception about quantum that you wish would disappear like immediately in quantum time.
I wish that all of quantum is quantum compute. That's the thing that I just want gone. I just wish I didn't have to explain that because I feel like no matter how often I explain it, nobody's getting it.
I totally agree with you.
All right. When you're talking to someone else about quantum, what is the one thing that tells you they actually understand the technology in the space?
If they know about different types of qubits.
if you could exist here and somewhere else all at the same time simultaneously, where would the other place be?
Oh my gosh. It's going to be it's some nerd fantasy book, right? Like, but not like one of the newfangled romanticy ones. Okay. Like the nerd, the early nerd ones. Okay.
Yeah. I feel like you need to find a little nerd out time on that at some point.
Yeah. Well, I'm talking Wheel of Time, not ACOTAR. Okay.
Yes.
I love it. All right. The last one here. What is like the biggest moment or inflection point or thing that's going to happen in quantum that's going to tell you it's gone from a nascent market into truly being prime time?
I think that the first time we see quantum compute being sold, a fully commercial stack being sold, it's not quantum advantage. I mean, that's cool and that's fun. And we see, NVIDIA building their first quantum data center. That's not it. It's going to be when we see a full market forming around commercial quantum compute is when the tipping point is. But I would say as an early stage investor, you're too late when that happens.
Awesome. Really good observation. Kelly, thank you so much for joining us on Massive Signals. I just want to make a quick observation. You are a great example of why I love not only being an investor, but being an investor in this space. Because the people and the companies and the conversations are so incredibly interesting and exciting, right? And to be able to spend your life digging into these industries, investing with exciting people and exciting companies that are really going to change everything is a truly lucky place to be. So thank you for being part of that community. Thank you for joining us today. I really look forward to seeing you again soon.
All right. Thank you for having me, guys. I really loved it.
Thanks for tuning in to Massive Signals. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to follow us on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube, and share the episode with someone who cares about the future of deep tech. And subscribe to our Substack at massive.vc to stay in the loop on all of our current investments, thinking, as well as upcoming events like our quarterly Deep Tech Table Dinners and the second annual Deep Tech Summit in May of 2026. Find it all at massive.vc. Until next time, keep listening for the signals that are shaping our future world.